Hey everyone, welcome back to Room 237, and now we come to the very end of my Planet of the Apes reviews. I have done the new reboot trilogy, the original series of 5 films, and now film-wise, because I don't have any of the animated series or live-action TV shows, or even the comic books, which I like to get. But film-wise, this is the last one. I do know there's a Japanese one because it was on Mystery Science Theater 3000. But of what we know of Planet of the Apes, the last film, and in my opinion, probably the worst one. I would have to think about it, but Tim Burton's 2001 reimagining. Yeah, it's not a remake, reboot, reimagining, as he calls it. And I think it's actually Tim Burton's first one. I mean, Mars Attacks really isn't one. That's just based on the trading cards. But this was before Willy Wonka. It was after Sleepy Hollow. Obviously before Alice in Wonderland. Now, in my previous reviews, I said there was only 2 Apes films that would be a rant. One of which was the second film in the original series of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. The other is this. Directed by Tim Burton, produced by Richard Zanuck, who produced the original, and stars Mark Wahlberg, Tim Roth, Helena Bonham Carter, of course, but this was the film they met. Michael Clark Duncan, Chris Christopherson, Estella Warren, Paul Giamatti. Appearances by David Warner. Why can I never remember that guy's name? Played Otho in Beetlejuice. He was the mayor in Nightmare Before Christmas. Glenn Shaddix. And of course, music by Danny Elfman. I'm not a fan of this film. I saw this when it first came out. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I don't remember when I saw it that year. And making it the first ever Planet of the Apes anything I ever saw, I actually didn't know it was an older thing. I didn't know it was an updated version. Even then, I mean, talking apes, big battles, war. You think any 9 or 10-year-old boy would be all into this? But it could not keep my attention. I found it confusing. I still find it confusing. And even though it did make a lot of money, but it was not received very well at all. And there's a big debate on whether this was the film that really showed studios that you can redo something and make a lot of money off of it. Which I have been meaning to make a video on the differences between remakes, reboots, reimaginings pre-2003 and 2003 to present. At least for horror films, because hugely different. I mean, it's petty, but it really does. It is kind of a pet peeve. It's sort of like why would you do that? When I see videos like top 10 best remakes, and I see like John Carpenter's The Thing, David Cronenberg's The Fly, along with Hills Have Eyes, Evil Dead, or worst remakes like Prom Night, The Fog, The Omen, with Gus Van Sant's Psycho. Pre-2003 and 2003 post, very different remakes. Totally different. That's a whole separate video. And I'm not sure what else I can say about this film that hasn't been said already. I mean, everyone has commented on how great the makeup is by Rick Baker, which is true. The confusing narrative, the terrible ending, the acting either being completely flatline boring are so over and under the top that it's just laughable. The set designs being okay, the cheesy fan service and in humor with ape humor. What more can I say? And Tim Burton is still one of my favorite filmmakers. I think he's one of the most... Yeah, that is true. One of the most original, unique, and creative filmmakers. That is when he does his own stuff. Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas, directed by Henry Selick, but it's a Tim Burton story style. Those are still two of my all-time favorite films from early childhood that I still love. Always loved Edward Scissorhands. I love Ed Wood. You know, those are Tim Burton movies that I look at those and I think Batman and Batman Returns. Even later films, I really like Sleepy Hollow. I love Sleepy Hollow. Still really like Sweeney Todd. I see this is a guy with style and vision. But then when he takes a property like this, and yes, I know Sleepy Hollow and Sweeney Todd exist outside Tim Burton. It's like, yeah, it's Tim Burton, but it's like Tim Burton branding. Like, what he did to this is the same thing he did for Willy Wonka, Alice in Wonderland, from what I've seen in the trailers, Dumbo. It's just a darker, more somber, not as interesting or creative version of the original. It takes place in 2029. The U.S. Air Force has a space station up in space, training apes to fly space pods. Wahlberg plays a guy named Leo. He's on the ship. He's training these chimps. His favorite being this chimp named Pericles. They come across this electromagnetic storm. It's heading towards the ship. They don't know how dangerous it is, so they opt to send Pericles in a pod to go probe and check out the storm. Wahlberg says it's a bad idea, just send him. They don't want to send a human. They send Pericles, they lose contact. Leo says screw that. Gets in a pod, goes into the storm, gets projected into year like 5021. I think it was 5021 AD, and finds that he's on a planet inhabited by intelligent apes and slave humans. And the rest of the film, other than that notion, really isn't like the original. And I don't mean that it doesn't have the same stuff happening, as it doesn't have the atmosphere, the intrigue, the clever commentary, even though its commentary is all over the place. Build up of suspense, like how Taylor lost his voice, so they think he's mute like the rest of the feral humans. It doesn't have any of that. The ending is pretty amazing how the original Planet of the Apes was known as one of the greatest twist endings in film history. Its reimagining has one of the worst. I don't even really know if you can call it a twist. If we remade The Sixth Sense, could we call that ending a twist? I think everyone's expecting it. But one of the worst endings. And I will say some of the fan service or in-jokes and callbacks to the original, I do accept a little more in this than I do, say, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is a fundamentally better made film. like where we have Malfoy yelling, "It's a madhouse," when all the chimps are screaming in their cages, or when Caesar has his wrist, he says, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." There are other throwbacks for more clever than that. I mean, even Caesar building a model of the Statue of Liberty, fine. But those were cringy. When we first see the apes, I mean, yeah, it is in this jungly area, and they're throwing nets on them. Then there's a big clearing. They throw them in like a cage wagon. Wahlberg, laying on the ground, reaches over, touches the leg of Colonel Attar, played by Michael Clark Duncan, who's a gorilla. He says, "Take your stinking hands off me, you damn dirty human." It kicks his hand out of the way. It's cheesy, but almost the whole movie is. And they do a lot more silly things in it that I kind of forgive it more than in Rise. They also... Charlton Heston makes an uncredited appearance as an ape, and he does his damn them all to hell" quote. But then, you have moments like, okay, so the humans get captured. They're brought to the slave trade place where Paul Giamatti plays Limbo, the comic relief orangutan. Then General Thade, leader of, at least the military, chimp, played by Tim Roth. And Tim Roth is so over the top in his performance that he makes 90s Al Pacino look like Stephen Wright. I mean, his whole thing is and just like snarling every line. That's him saying hello. And Mark Wahlberg's performance is so, like, when he's not reacting like the Mark Wahlberg, like, he's just like straight-faced and quiet, yet they keep acting like he's the wild human that they got to keep an eye on, even though he hasn't done anything. Helena Bonham Carter is daughter of the senator, played by David Warren, one of my favorite character actors. And she's kind of like the Zira, but not a doctor or anything. She's just the rights activist, the human rights activist. Humans should be slaves or mistreated. She gets Limbo to sell Mark Wahlberg and Estella Warren to her. But it, like, some of the humans talk, but some don't, and that kills the suspense and power of the original. You know how humans can't talk, which makes the irony and commentary that much more interesting. So, like, when Taylor can finally say, "Damn dirty apes," it's a big shock to all the other apes. Here, they all talk, the English for everyone is just fine. But also, at the senator's home, there's like 2 more human slaves, and then there's a gorilla as well, who was put there because he was in the military and he opposed Thade. Which, I want to get the actor that played Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa as General Kroll. I hope I pronounced that right. He plays the servant gorilla. And then there's like a dinner with the senator, General Thade, this other politician played by Shaddix, who's a orangutan, his wife, and they talk about how filthy humans are, and Tim Roth like talks about how filthy they are and how they should, how they're lower than, they're subpar to every life. And then he like grabs Mark Wahlberg and like pulls his mouth apart. He's like, "Is there a soul in there?" And there's all these in jokes like this that make the throwback lines not as cringy. They keep doing ape stuff. Like, we see Ari, and we see like a pen. Like she's drawing or writing. And then we see one hand go like this. Then we see the other hand, but the pen's still going. And then we pan down and see she's doing it with her feet. Because ape feet. Just like we have a scene with Paul Giamatti when he's like shirtless and he's rubbing roses on himself to get the smell of humans off him. But the roses are flying up, so then we spin around to show he's hanging upside down. And just a lot of goofy stuff like that. So that when they do throwback lines like, "You damn dirty human," it's... And that's what I mean. Like, Rise is a very serious film that lines like that really throw off the tone. Here, everything is just so silly and all over the place. I mean, it has the dark tone of like a Tim Burton movie. Like, or any of his remakes or redos, like Willy Wonka or Alice in Wonderland. It's just very dark and dull at the same time look to it. But they have silly shit like that. I will say that the set design of Ape City was alright. I mean, they still kept it with the original as opposed to the original novel by Pierre Boulle. How it's like a it's not an advanced city. It's still like a jungle. Only their houses are more like tree houses, and we see like an ape nightclub. We see ape children playing basketball together. And we get, and if it's not obvious already, Thade hates humans. Which, Tim Roth, great actor. My favorite performance of his would obviously have to be Reservoir Dogs. He was great at, I liked him in Pulp Fiction, Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino movies. Mark Wahlberg is so just going along with everything that it's not really a performance half the time. The one that I will say, Michael Clark Duncan probably does do the best. One, his voice fits so perfectly, his voice and his stature. But, I also buy him as like a general or a colonel. But also, like, even in the original films, you can kind of hear the restriction of the voice and face of the actor. Here, it's even worse. I mean, like, almost all of Helena Bonham Carter's lines are whispered for whatever reason. And, like, whispered, but fast, like she always does. But you can hear the stiff mouth restriction. These two other ape soldiers show Thade where the ship crashed. Then he kills them so that no one can know why. We don't really find out. Other than when the apes are gathering the military to go out to the Forbidden Zone to stop the humans, Thade goes to meet with his father, played by Charlton Heston. And that's when he tells him, or we find out that they're descendants of Semos, the first ape, their god. Kind of the Caesar figure. And him and Thade discuss how, there was a time before time where humans were dominant and we were their slaves. Then he's got this red, like teardrop shaped ball decorated flames around it. He has Thade break it, and there's an old rusty pistol in it. He says this is proof of their intellectual power, which would have been more effective if the humans couldn't speak. If we have, primal, not intelligent humans, then seeing a sophisticated weapon like a pistol would show they had some intelligence some time ago. And of course, about a quarter of Tim Roth's performance is sniffing things. Like, he holds the pistol. Apes can't swim in this, because there's a whole battle out in the desert where Mark Wahlberg has to carry Ari through this body of water. Oh, they also bring Limbo with them because we need the Paul Giamatti, because we need the comic relief. But yeah, when he's talking to Charlton Heston, that he's on his deathbed, and I believe that was his final role. That's as he's dying, that's when he says, damn them all to hell. Which some people have said is cheesy enough to kill the serious moment. I don't think this movie's very well deserving of a very serious moment. But I think that line fits more than some of the other ones. It didn't really bother me as much. But there we get why Thade killed the other two ape soldiers. That way, Mark Wahlberg will just seem like a normal human. Nothing special about him. But then this also makes I was going to say it makes the ending a bit more confusing, but I guess it doesn't. So, the Wahlberg, Estelle Warren, Chris Christopherson was her father, who pretty much sacrificed himself so they could get away. The gorilla servant, that was former military, Ari, I'm guessing Estella Warren's younger brother or whoever, Limbo, and Ari, if I haven't said her already, walking through the desert. And we have lines like where Ari's asking about the future, or his planet rather. And he said, or like, asks what a zoo is, and he says what a zoo is. And as they're walking by the camera, Limbo is like, apes in cages, right? Yeah, well, get it, because irony. Thade has the senator declare martial law, so now the military's in charge. And there's like base camps out in the desert near the Forbidden Zone. And so like they have to get past them. Of course, apes can't swim, so they just... And they do get horses. There's some... Also, with they do have like the scarecrow figures from the original that Ari kind of touches on, where she says they put them there to keep apes away, whatever. I will say I like the look of the final battle, where we got apes on horseback, and then apes like alongside them running really fast. Which, if you watch the making of on this, it is interesting. I mean, they had like huge mats where they're like running in place on it, being dragged behind a truck. Thought that was kind of cool. And I mean, their armor looks alright. Their helmets kind of had like a General Ursus kind of look. But once they get to the Forbidden Zone, which they call Kalima, it's... Actually, is there a picture of it in here anywhere? Probably not. Yeah, there's Charlton Heston as a old dying ape. Nope, they don't have a picture of it anywhere. That figures. But it looks like this big ruin of some form of technology. They get inside, and they realize it's Mark Wahlberg's ship. And what happened was, When Wahlberg got lost in the storm, his ship followed to find him, but he got sucked in the time-propelling part of the storm, and they didn't. So they crashed in real time, and then he crashed some 3,000 years later. And this is the ruin of the ship. And Kalima, because C-A-L-I, or M-A, are the only letters that are obscured by dust and dirt, is the caution live animals sign. Yet all the technology inside still works just fine. So like he's able to pull up the staticky video journal about, with like the captain and then the ape handler saying like, we've crashed, the apes have gone mad, we hear them shrieking in the background. Apparently the apes led a mutiny on the ship. And Mark Wahlberg sees that the ship has a little bit of fuel left, so when the first wave of apes come, he just blasts them away. But then they have a battle where, like, the former military guerrilla turned servant goes up against Thade, gets killed. We see humans from all over have now joined. And it's like this big epic battle for the planet. But then all of a sudden, this other pod comes down. And everyone stops to look up at it. And it opens, and it's Pericles the chimp. Just now finding his way to the planet. But of course, to all the other apes, they think of it as Simos. Because Simos is supposed to come back to them from the sky at some point. So they see Pericles as Simos returning, the second coming of their god. But Tim Roth as Thade isn't having any of it. They end up inside the ship. Thade and Leo fight. There's this one blaster left that Pericles tries to help, but Thade punches him away. And, the blaster gets knocked out of Leo's hand. Thade lunges after it. And then Leo realizes that he's in the pilot's deck, so he hits the thing. The glass shuts, and Thade is trapped. He has a bit of an ape tantrum where the camera kind of pulls back, and it's like structure, glass, and an ape going crazy inside. Almost as if to say he's been reduced to his, like what we would see in a zoo. And he just keeps blasting. And it keeps ricocheting everywhere. And he delivers one of the cheesiest lines of the movie. Because earlier he tells Colonel Attar that they're not just in the military together, they're friends. And now Colonel Attar has a whole change of faith because Wahlberg tells him, it's like, this whole thing is the truth to your past. Humans and apes once coexisted. And Thade and his family has lied to everybody for thousands of years. And that's when Thade looks up at her and is like, help me, my friend. Of course, he keeps doing like this a lot. So over the top. And then he goes up to Ari, is like, let me out. Can we hint that they've had a romance? And at one point she goes to Thade to bargain for the humans' lives, which he brands her hand with their mark, because they brand humans. Which she has her hand up on the glass, he puts his hand up, but then when he moves it, he sees the symbol of humans, as if to say the humans have now trapped him. And then we get an ending similar to the original, where he does kiss the human girl goodbye, but he also kisses Ari goodbye. So it's like the Zira Taylor kiss. but not near as effective or Twilight Zone-y as the original. That he gives Pericles to Ari to look after him. He gets in the pod, goes up, gets caught in the storm, gets sent back to present-day America in Washington, D.C. And I guess the ending is more like the novel than the original film. But he crashes at the Lincoln a memorial. And when he gets out, it's still, everything is still the same. It's still the Lincoln Monument, but the head is that of an ape. It's even got Lincoln's hair, but it's an ape face. And on the back it says, "This shrine is for General Thade." I guess implying that Thade somehow figured out how to repair this ruined ship that had no fuel and get back to Earth way before Wahlberg did and change the course of history. And then Wahlberg is then swarmed by police officers, fire department, news people, all of which are apes. But it's advanced modern Earth, like cars, police uniforms, hats, everything. And I found it funny that, so like how it said General Thade, as if that's his first and last name, not just Thade or whatever. But he was able to all of that obvious stuff I just said aside, this one ape was able to take over all humans where there's no other intelligent apes, and then still keep the same, because all of DC is still the same. There's still the Washington Monument, there's still the Lincoln Monument. Everything is still the same except humans and apes are now switched. It doesn't show any humans to see what they're like. But it doesn't really explain any of that. Or really, like, there's more to this movie, but it is so convoluted that I don't even think it's worth talking about. That's just the bare plot points of the film. And I always found that ending very serious, very stupid. I mean, the original film, you get the idea, okay, he's been on Earth the entire time. There's the Statue of Liberty. Man destroyed itself with, a nuclear war. But with this, it's like an actual planet of apes. There's a separate planet. And it just, I think this movie just not undoes, because we still have the original to watch and enjoy, but it kind of undoes its own purpose as to what made that film so entertaining, loved, effective, and respected. Just what this did to make it its own just undoes all of that. It is a completely separate planet. Humans can talk, so there's no big reveal when they can. General Thade was somehow able to do the impossible, which in the realm of science fiction, because I'm not very big on science fiction, but isn't the whole butterfly effect theory, like, how could he come back and somehow still keep everything exactly the same, only with apes? Like, he became Lincoln, essentially. Most of the acting is so over the top. The only positives I can give this film is, of course, the makeup. Rick Baker, phenomenal. Still, when I watch this, I still look at the makeup and I think it is spectacularly done. I would say it looks the best on Michael Clark Duncan. That's the most seamless. But the female apes, like Helena Bonham Carter, Glenn Shaddix's wife, they look like half human, half ape. But Glenn Shaddix as the orangutan, he looked excellent as well. David Warner kind of looked like himself, but you know the effects of the makeup on I'm stuttering just because I don't know what else to say about this film. Yeah, that's number one. I will say the set designs and everything, what little we see, because they're only in Ape City for very little. The rest is like woods and desert. Okay. The costumes, I guess the armor, they certainly didn't copy the original. They did kind of do their own thing. I do like how the red chimp soldiers is like a General Ursus kind of helmet. Other than that, you can see its budget. I will say it doesn't look like a late 90s, early 2000s cheap action flick. You can see the budget in it. Other than that, there's really nothing I can say about it. The acting is either so over the top or so boring and almost, over the phone. The story is just convoluted. They're very contradictory. Charlton Heston talks about, because when he was saying they were masters and we were slaves, it was like, but if they all came from the apes on the ship, how was that so? But of course they came from Earth. But then Mark Wahlberg talks about how they were all peaceful with each other, and that's what turns the Colonel against Thade. I just don't think this movie really deserved... The most interesting thing about this movie is the failed unused scripts that were unused in favor of this. Because the Planet of the Apes reimagining goes back as far as the late 80s. Roddy McDowell was even going to be involved at one point. Which, I'm surprised there was not... If there was, I missed it. But there was not one Roddy McDowell nod or mention. I mean, he was passed away by the time this came out, yes. So, I mean, he could have had a cameo like Charlton Heston did, but, I mean, there's going to be, like, a Return of the Apes. I mean, there was going to be, Philip Noyce, Oliver Stone, Don Murphy, Jane Hampshire. Oh, those were all going to be producers. But at different points, Chris Columbus, Sam Hamm, James Cameron, and Peter Jackson, and the Hughes brothers were all going to be directors at one point. At one point, Stan Winston was involved with the makeup. Of course, then it went to Rick Baker. But I was reading about the the score is very forgettable, but during like the end credits where it has like a lot of like a loud tribal drum sound, I do like that. There was one that Oliver Stone was going to do where it was going to be kind of like Rise. It was going to be in the near future. A plague was making humans extinct. Oh man, there's time travel involved. You could almost do a whole video on the Planet of the Apes that never was. Actually, I might do that at some point. But yeah, this really does show that more money, better effects, and more contemporary filmmaking doesn't necessarily make anything better or even show that it needs to be. Because the film from 1968, I actually like... I kind of get more into that makeup and that... Because in those films, everyone walked upright. They showed that they were more evolved, other than just speech and thinking. Like, yeah, the new trilogy shows them still running like apes, but they are still apes. But here they really play around with the fact they are still apes. Like, other than Ari drawing with her feet, we see soldiers playing poker with each other, and one using his foot to pass cards to himself to cheat. And I just think this film, everything that the original did well and effectively, this one does the opposite. This shows how you don't do a Planet of the Apes film. I mean, technically it is Planet of the Apes because it is its own separate planet. But it's also an example of just, you know, further along in the story when it was like, but how are they doing that when I thought this happened? It's just like, oh, well, screw it. We're going this direction now. I would have to say I do like Beneath the Planet of the Apes more, only because it is part of the original, I almost said trilogy, series. And even though I don't really like the mutants in that aspect of that film, I still like the parts with the original apes in that movie than I do this. Again, last thing I'll say, because I'm just going to start repeating myself, because I really don't know what else I can say about this. I mean, it wasn't enough to hook me when I was 9 or 10 years old. If talking, fighting apes couldn't get a 9 or 10-year-old interested, that's a problem. I'm not saying my opinion is everything, but... And it really is a testament to how the original is known as one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, with one of the greatest twist endings of all time. And then this literally is the polar opposite. Considered a failed film, despite being a huge box... Well, how huge of a box office? Because it was made 100 million, made 362.2. So yeah, made over 3 times its budget. So big box office success. But known to not have any of the gravitas, any of the... literally anything over the original. And one of the worst endings of all time. Least favorite Apes film. I'm glad that this film did just bad enough to cancel out all sequels, because this was supposed to be the kickstart to the new 1968. It's going to get a line of sequels, TV shows, comic books, action figures, everything. In fact, I think this did worse than anyone could have ever expected, because all of that was canceled. All sequels, merchandise, well, I don't know about merchandise, but sequels, spin-offs, comics were all canceled, discontinued, until 2011 when the unthinkable happened and we actually had a successful new series of films. So with that, I end my 9-video series of Planet of the Apes reviews. It's been great going back to rewatch all of these, most of them. I hope you've all enjoyed my Planet of the Apes reviews, and yeah, so anyway, thank you for watching.